So we have a greater risk of being struck by lightning. I currently am in Florida, and lightning strikes happen all of the time. And in the States, this is not fatalities, but the odds of being struck by lightning are 1 in 700,000. And generally, unless you actually have been struck by lightning or know somebody that has, people aren't actually terrified of lightning. Snakes, on the other hand, people really are afraid of, or at least a lot of people are. I used to like to go catching snakes. When I moved to Florida, I stopped doing that because they have poisonous ones. But in 2018, worldwide, we are talking about 100,000 deaths. When you look at the population of the world, which is in billions, actually not a lot of deaths. Mosquitoes, on the other hand, these nasty creatures last year killed 750,000 people. People are not afraid of mosquitoes generally. Cars. Cars killed 1.35 million people in 2018. By the way, there was a static death rate of about 1.25 million people a year for a number of years, and then it bumped up again. So people are not afraid of getting in cars. So the risk decisions we make as to what we're afraid of and what we're concerned about are not always logical, and it is based on how we make decisions and what we're afraid of, and some of it is cultural, and some of it is actually based on the way that our brains work. So one of the most important things that a CISO does when they start in an organization is nothing. The most effective CISOs that I know, when they first go to an organization, actually make very little change. What they do is they establish trust. They learn about the organization, they build relationships so that people will trust them and will make decisions based on that credibility, based on that trust. So one of the things that is really important for social engineers when they come into an organization is they really, really, really should not destroy the trust that a CISO has worked incredibly hard to build. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is those trust relationships and how important trust is. Because once trust is broken and violated, it is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to rebuild. And when you destroy those trust relationships, people will actively work against the interests. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that I strongly recommend based on my experiences and the experiences of others. But some of what we want to talk about are what you are concerned about. So feel free to come up to the mic at any point and talk to me and disagree with me, because if you can change my mind, you get a gold star. Okay. So there, in management, there's this guy called Peter Drucker. And he came up with the saying that what gets measured gets managed. And Drucker actually was a brilliant guy and did a lot of wonderful things for management. This was probably one of the worst things he ever did. I can give you some my favorite example was when I first started with Tampa Airport. They only had one measurement that they gave to their board. And the board meetings were on camera, public record, public information, everybody could see. And that one thing that they gave was server uptime. Not application uptime, not system uptime. The only thing they gave was server uptime. And not understanding what that meant, the board didn't realize that having a server up for literally years was a bad thing. And convincing management to change that and no longer report on that was difficult because I had to establish trust. I had to establish trust in terms of how they were going to stop reporting this to the board without making themselves look incompetent and inept. And it wasn't that they were incompetent or inept. They didn't understand the risks because they had for a very long time had a closed system, and the only thing that was easy to measure was server uptime. So just because it's easy doesn't mean it's good, and it doesn't mean it's relevant. So I like to follow a guy named Deming in a lot of things that I do, and Deming was historically in management. After World War II, the Japanese were very poor in their product quality, and he went to Japan and helped them in their factories look at their processes. And the important thing about everything that Deming did was he blamed the processes, not the people. And if you look at what Deming talks about, it's this cycle of plan, do, check, act, or plan, do, study, act. It's looking at systems, and then when you do something, when you make a change, you're going to check and validate that worked, and then you're going to act on it and repeat. So you have this plan, do, study, act, plan, do, study, act. You're not taking an action and then figuring out what it does for you. So some people call it ready, aim, fire, as opposed to fire, ready, aim. Yeah. So part of it is looking at why you are doing things and making sure that you're doing them to eliminate risks. So we're going to talk about meaningful measurements, okay? So what are you measuring or recommending that you be measuring, and why? Why are you measuring? So for a lot of organizations, everything is compliance-based. It's compliance-focused. So if you're within healthcare or you're working within PCI, you have to do annual security awareness training. We're not talking about the quality of the training. It's checkbook box exercise. Can you say that everybody took this training? It's really fun because you will find that executives will have their secretaries take that training for them. That's really great, especially if anybody ever does research and follows up and finds out the IP address that the training came from. But why are you doing it? If you're just doing phishing exercises because an auditor said you had to do it, if you're only doing social engineering because it was a recommendation by some third party, it is a compliance measurement, and it is not going to be effective to do what you want it to do. In everything within information security, it is tone at the top. It is what executive management believes and is doing, and that is what you really want to look at. The other thing that could be happening is you could be doing social engineering because you had a breach within your organization. Never let a good breach go to waste. Okay? But the problem with when it is breach motivated, you really, really need to have the business reasons for why you're doing it, so that when they get tired of the emergency reaction to the breach, that they understand the business reason for why you're doing it. Sorry, we didn't do it earlier, but this is why, and this is why we're going to continue to do it. For a lot of organizations, it's to develop awareness. That is great, because the more awareness that, and when we talk security awareness, as opposed to actually developing awareness, two different things. When you talk about security awareness, it means that people are actually aware of what security is and what the risks are, and why they shouldn't do certain behaviors. If you talk about security awareness training, again, usually checkbox. Risk reduction. That is why I truly believe in security awareness training. I believe in it. I believe in social engineering. I believe in phishing and vishing. I believe in smishing. I believe that you have to do all of these things, because if you don't reduce the risks to your organization related to a real bad actor doing those things. And then the best is when you have an absolute culture of security, and you are doing all of these things because it is organizationally accepted, and this is a normal behavior. So when we talk about meaningful measures, these are measures that are very typically used and are not necessarily meaningful. So when we talk about the percentage of users who have attended security awareness training, if the training isn't good training and is not actually teaching them, even if you have 100%, it may not be meaningful. If you have organizations where people are sharing answers, that's one of my favorite. When your DLP solution picks up the employees sharing the answers to the questions, really good feeling. But when you look at that, it doesn't necessarily mean good things. It doesn't necessarily mean bad things. It just means you met a compliance requirement. The next thing you have is who failed phishing exercises. We're going to talk a little bit more about people who fail phishing exercises, but you can do with most phishing solutions, you can pretty easily report on who opened the email, who clicked on a link, who opened the attachment. But here's the thing. I think it's more important to talk about who failed the phishing attack and did not attend training. That's probably the only time that I would ever list an individual's names, and I would only list that individual's name to their supervisor and to HR. It is not something to be widely distributed. So I think in terms of really true, meaningful metrics and the things that we want to look at in terms of when we're talking about phishing is let's talk about the organization as a whole. Let's talk about baselines in terms of how much spam is hitting your organization and how much spam are you blocking at the gateway. Because one of the things is the fact that spam is getting to our user populations is our fault. It is because our technology is not good enough to stop it. So what happens is the individual is the last line of defense. And because that individual is the last line of defense because of our technical failings, we really need to look at how responsible are they. If we haven't trained them well enough and we don't have the technical security controls, we're talking last line. In some organizations, they're being held accountable, and that's not necessarily appropriate. Okay. Here's the thing. When we go back and look at those same things in terms of percentage of users who phished in the exercise, I actually really don't care as much about who clicked a link, who gave up their credentials. All of those things aren't as important as the fact that they didn't report it. The really critical thing is report it and report it fast. Because if you report it and you report it fast, I can mitigate the damage. I can determine whether or not you actually had credentials that could compromise systems. There is a university system that I'm aware of that had a problem where somebody gave up credentials in a phish and didn't say anything, and they didn't find out for months. And without the audit trail that they need, they cannot determine whether or not systems were compromised. They have no idea how badly their system has been infiltrated, if at all, and they're having a major debate internally as to how big a disclosure they have to make. And the privacy people are saying, you need to disclose that everything could have been exposed. I mean, that's the really ugly side of something going bad and not reporting. So instead, let's look at it differently. Let's not care as much about who clicked the link as who didn't report when they did. Because once you figure out who's clicking a link, we can start delving in a little bit more as to why and maybe helping them. But on the other hand, If they don't tell you, your risks are much higher. So within the social engineering community, there's a guy named Chris Hadnagy. He is one of the top people. He really is. And Chris runs what's called Social Engineering Village at DEF CON every year. Every year. It is a massive event. It is a ton of work for him and his team. And if you haven't been to DEF CON and haven't been to SC Village, you've really missed a really exciting experience. But what happened one year, Chris, who is literally one of the worldwide experts on it, got a phish related to delivery of a package, and he clicked on it and immediately had that oh no sinking feeling. Now, fortunately, he was running it in a virtual environment and just blew out the environment, and no harm, no foul. But if the best of us can get tricked, what chance does somebody who is barely computer literate have? So then we want to talk about the users who failed the phishing test, didn't report, and didn't take the training. Those are the people that I really, really, really want to talk about seriously going after. But again, let's talk about it in a risk-based context. If you're reporting on all users equally, all users are not equal. Not all users can access sensitive data. Not all users have administrative privileges, or at least hopefully they don't. So what we should be talking about are the compensating controls to those users. So you get somebody who's always clicking on links. Hey, if they only have very, very limited access, it's not a problem. Those are the users that you want to make sure that you have removed all administrative privileges from. All. Sorry, no more admin privileges on that laptop. I don't care who you are. You don't have them. So that they can't escalate. You want to make sure that their email filtering is as good as it gets. You want to make sure that that person's device is the first device patched in your environment. So if you do a rolled out testing of patching, there's your test. They're first, always, because they're your highest risk. In most organizations, the people that we care about and the people that we focus on are the lowest level employees and not the highest level employees. In some organizations, they're not even phishing the execs. Salespeople tend to be some of the worst in terms of clicking, but they're always trying to get new people. So should they have full access all the time? Are their devices patched all the time? And those are the things that you really, really should be caring about, reducing the risk for those people that are dangerous. Okay, so baseline them. Know what the percentage of people are that are going to fall for a phish. And when you're doing these metrics, look, phish are more likely to be clicked on late on a Friday afternoon or late in the afternoon the day before a holiday. So if you're doing metrics and you're comparing somebody clicking on a link on Monday morning to Friday afternoon, it's not the same thing. It's not, because people are more apt to click on a link at specific times. The other thing is context. Look, if I am in human resources and you send me an accounts receivable phish, I'm not in accounts receivable. If you send somebody in a hospital, if you send a nurse an email related to payroll, sending them out W-2s, they're going to know it's not related to them. They're not going to click on it. So context is very important. And then the other thing is, some phish are framed better than others. Do they have all of those wonderful identifiers? All the grammar errors and things that say "dear customer" as opposed to a person's name. Do they have all of those red flags? Some are crafted well because they are, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay. By the way, there's some interesting numbers that I'm seeing in various reports from individuals that I know and trust, that an individual who clicks on a link is actually much more likely to click on a link. So you will have people that, if they're clickers, it's going to take more work to break them out of the habit. So you need to find out what it takes. Yes?
Can I just say, it seems like job description also matters, because if your job description isn't like in sales, then you're automatically taking, you have to open attachments from strangers, POs, things like that.
So the comment was the job descriptions matter, and 100% agree, because certain people have to open attachments from certain places. But then again, part of it is looking at your email solution, and does your email solution open attachments? Are you prohibiting attachments from going to certain individuals? How are you dealing with the risk related to those things? There is, for example, out there phishing training that says you can't open anything but a TXT file. Beware of everything but a TXT file. But that training misses the point of non-IT people not recognizing that all I have to do is change the extension on my executable file from exe to TXT, and boom, it's in, and they'll open it. So you have to be careful about who your users are and what they're getting. And part of it is, it really is based, again, on risk, the size of your organization. The size of your organization is going to talk about what type of controls you can have in place and afford to have in place, and what types of controls you can't. And what are you going to do to mitigate the risk based on the organization? So a major corporation really should have very strong controls in place in terms of their email gateway. A smaller organization, likely not. So Verizon DBIR, everybody read it every year? Oh, say yes. Yes, please. If you do not, it is free. Get it. Open it. It's great because it talks about things by industry. And it also talks about, oh, what's effective, what's working, okay? 2019, 32%, count it, 32% of breaches involved phish. It works, and because it works, people are going to use it a lot more. I also like, in organizations that actually have phishing programs, click rates decrease over time. Now that click rate, some organizations are high as 30 or 40% when they start. And it can subside incredibly. But obviously, it only takes one success. So even though we're getting them down, and getting them down, and getting them down, if that one successful person, because they have excessive permissions, you can still have bad things happen. Oh, trust. You're going to hear me say trust a lot, because trust is important. Trust is a two-way street, okay? A lot of times, we don't trust our user population. Right? Let's start with the fact that we call them users. They're really not all drug addicts, honest. Most of them are not, okay? But if you look at the communication with our user population, most people that we work with are specialists in areas that are non-IT, non-technical related. Just because they're not technical experts does not mean that they are not smart and brilliant people. And underestimating them is a mistake, because they will find workarounds because they want to do their jobs. Right? Part of the reason why IT switched from mainframe to client server, and by the way, I am old enough to remember when people said client server is never going to happen. The reason why we moved to cloud-based and we have all of these shadow ITs is because it's all about the business, and the business has to happen. And because the business has to happen, they will find a way. If they don't trust you, that's not going to happen. And if you start doing a security awareness program that is gotcha, they're not going to trust you. So how do you overcome that? Communication. Okay. By the way, my grandmother had one of these phones. It was awesome. And you want to do something fun? Give a child one of these things and see if they can make a call. They can't. Okay. Your communication needs to be effective. It needs to be constant. It needs to be consistent. And it needs to be in a method that is relevant to the generation you're talking to. And because we live in multi-generational environments, that means communicating multiple ways. You need to know the culture of your organization. You need to know what communication is effective, because you want to tell them in advance, we are going to do what is called social engineering. We are going to be testing you, and why? We're going to be testing you because the bad guys are doing this every single day. And you need to play everybody's favorite radio station, WIFM. What's in it for me? How is this going to help me at home? How can what I learn here translate back to home and family? Because if you can do a communication that people will listen to because it is meaningful to them, you will have greater buy-in and, establish greater trust. So we start our wonderful social engineering with OSINT light. We're not really talking about doing heavy OSINT when we first start doing social engineering within an organization. Okay? And the reason why I recommend this is if you are still at the stage where you are selling this to management, you need to teach them how easy it is. So when you provide results using a search engine, use the search engine that the company uses. Whatever the approved search, and if they allow all of them, then use all of them. Okay? Go to the corporate website. Find out everything you can from the corporate website. It's great. Publicly traded companies, they have filings with the SEC. It's called an SEC 10K. Great information. There are some organizations that on their website will post a document that's called a SOC 2. A SOC 2 Type 2 is not something that is generally meant to be shared with the public. It tells incredible details about the environment that really shouldn't be publicly shared. But guess what? Happens all the time. High trust, full high trust reports, again, talks about the environment, gives wonderful details that you can use for pretext. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Twitter's great. Facebook, I love Facebook. You have heard before and will hear again. If you do not have a Facebook account that is not your Facebook account, get one created. If you have a friend who has abandoned Facebook, ask them if you can take over that account. Okay? The older a Facebook account is, and I luckily have somebody that gave me an old Facebook account that is dormant, it's great because nobody knows and can't trace it back. Okay? So one of the things you want to do is use those Facebook accounts to look at the publicly accessible information that people post on their Facebook account. LinkedIn. LinkedIn is great in so many ways because IT people love putting stuff about the technology that they're using and sometimes their current projects. HR, job postings, Dice, Indeed. Here, this is great because now we're talking specifically about the technologies within a company. Awesome, awesome intel. And by providing this information when we are talking, it provides great, great help in terms of building a social engineering. Okay? So use whatever the organization uses, but this is what I really want you to take away. Do not use fear. Because what does fear do? It destroys trust. And staying away from fear is important. Now, do the bad guys use fear? Oh, yes. but you're trying to train people. Now, are there exceptions? Yes. Remember, we're talking risk-based. If you are in an industry where you have secrets, where there are spies and espionage that may be attacking you, if you are talking the defense industry, et cetera, yeah, there may be cases where you may want to use fear, but you really, really, really want to use that as last resort. So, when we're talking about pretexting, okay, the Verizon DBR gives a lovely little, this was from the 2018, it's the creation of a false narrative. So, after you've done your OSINT and you're going to create that false narrative, because, yes, it is true, loose lips do sink ships, still happens, okay? You want to look at doing additional OSINT, okay? And we're not going to scare people, remember that? But you take your next step, which is going to go VISH. So here's the thing. A lot of the stuff that, if you're within an organization, you actually don't have to do some of the social engineering yourself in order to learn how to do a VISH. An external social engineer is going to need. So it's, part of this, again, is contextual, because an internal social engineer already knows about the campaigns. They know who reports to who. They know the business terminology. They know the locations of all of the organizations. They know who the vendors are. They know all of that information. Is it an unfair advantage? No, because realistically, if you're talking about the bad guys, they fished their way in. They're in your organization. They're actually reading communications. They have accessed information that they are going to use to escalate. They have figured out how people write emails, how they sign them, how they address things. They are able to replicate information amazingly well if you are truly a target. So, in the VISH, I love targeting IT. I'm sorry. IT is more fun than anybody. They really are. Because a lot of people with IT, and again, depends on the culture of the organization, but a lot of people in IT will be flattered if they get a phone call. Or they're so busy. Depending on the organization's policies, people will do things for a free lunch or an offer of a free lunch. They'll do things, so you get somebody that says they're from a company and they're doing a cold call and they need to know more about your environment so that they can appropriately show you how their solution can help. It's like, why would you tell them anything? Why? Then you've got the sales for vendors, okay? And don't forget, I love these guys, assisting in securing your environment. Why would you let a company that you haven't done due diligence on run password scans on your environment? Why would you do that? Why would you allow them to run vulnerability scans against your environment? Why would you let somebody you don't know, don't trust, don't have a relationship do those things? So be careful about those. Oh, and then people that say they're doing research, students, awards. So we have, you all know what phish is. The FTC has defined it. Don't use fear. Again, again, again. Don't use sextortion. Don't use your account has been hacked. Don't go to the gut. Don't twist people's stomach in a knot. It's not worth it, because you can teach people this in your security awareness training program. You don't have to use phish to do it. And by not using phish, you keep your trust relationship. Are these phish actually happening in the real world? Yes, but there are better ways to train without destroying your relationship. So let's talk about what works better. Monthly themes. I love monthly themes. By the way, one of my favorites is I did a whole campaign on March Madness pools because they're a favorite. And then one of the organizations I was working with, one of the employees decided to do a March Madness pool and talk to HR and send out that email. And all of a sudden, we had fish reporting all over the place. The good news was we had fish reporting all over the place. Okay? But every single month, think of a different theme, because there are certain fish that always happen on certain months. Go for it. Pick your theme, pick what's happening, and follow it. Or use a monthly theme. So, email systems. If you're using Box and somebody sends something from Dropbox or Google Docs, meeting requests, those are fun. So use things on a monthly theme that you're rotating so that people understand. The reality is there are emails that go out. So the take action before your email account is deactivated, that's not gonna scare somebody. I mean, it's a bad email, and nobody should fish this link because it's really obvious, but that is not going to make somebody afraid. It's going to teach them. And it works. And it works because there's tons of them out there. Okay, the payroll requests related to W-2s. Payroll departments need to be specifically trained to look out for this. Organizationally, should people know? Yeah. But payroll departments really need to be trained. So do targeted training by department. Is it more work? Yes. But is it really valuable? Yes. Payroll departments getting anything from C-suites. I repeatedly see things related to, please change my direct deposit. Why? I mean, yeah. Accounts receivable. I have actually seen where a company's entire accounts receivable listing with who the clients were and how much money they owed was sent out in an email response. That's ugly. That's competitive information that is ugly to have shared. Demands for payment from my accounts payable, wire transfers. All of these things are very, very common. Target them to the specific department. Don't send them out to the whole organization, because you wind up being a lot of noise, and if you're a lot of noise, nobody's going to pay attention to you. Okay? Information technology. One of the things that happens is if an organization has an accounting firm that is looking at IT, they flood a lot of requests for information. If it's not relevant to your organization, don't worry about it. But fake external accounting organization fish, they're great because people will dump out a ton of information. Again, with IT, conference passes, awards, all kinds of great themes. Industry specific, so whatever the industry you are in, look at. So there's a whole lot of things happening with colleges and universities where students are being targeted. And students are being targeted for things related to class registration and, more importantly, student loans. And these are real trigger points for these people. So, current events. Always have in your back pocket some fish that you can send out for catastrophes, celebrities, political elections. And again, remember, culturally, if these emails don't go into your environment and are not allowed, don't send them. It's a worthless fish. They will know it is part of the phishing program. It will have less relevance. So what is important? Trust. Okay? So counter to trust is programs that do what we call consequentialism. Okay? And when people are punished for clicking links as part of phishing programs, 3 clicks and you're out, 5 clicks and you're out. The problem with that is, first of all, the most important people in the organization are likely not to be terminated for violating that. And that is a bad thing if it is not consistent. If you're not looking at the context of how hard are the fish that people are being fished with, you are looking at organizations that are not trust-based organizations. So, Is it really a cultural fit to be even working in an organization that's doing that? That's a larger question. But look at the things that we were talking about before in terms of what are important measures before you start victimizing the victims who have fallen for the fish. Why didn't they learn from your training? Is it an employee who has too high a workload? Is it an employee who has access to nothing and it doesn't really matter? Look at the context, make appropriate recommendations. If you are not measuring the effectiveness of the training, and if you're not measuring whether it's really helping your employees learn, then you are punishing them for your own failings, okay? So look at, again, compensating controls and risk-based related to whoever is clicking. So we don't have much time, but does anybody have any questions? You guys are quiet. All right. I thank you very, very much. I will be hanging around all day, so if you want to get in touch with me, and there's my Twitter handle. So it's been a pleasure, and have a great day.